Jason Carter never imagined he'd be moving back into his childhood home at 23, after graduating from college in Seattle. He thought life would fall into place, but reality had a different plan. His first serious relationship had ended in betrayal. He had trusted her, even talked about marriage. But one night he came home early and found her in their bed with someone else. That night changed him. He shut down emotionally. He dropped his job hunt. Bills piled up, and with nowhere else to go, he swallowed his pride and called his father. "You can stay here for a while," David Carter said over the phone. "Things have changed." Jason didn't ask what that meant. He'd just packed a suitcase and boarded a train. Back to Portland. What, Jason didn't expect was her dot Rachel, his father's new wife. She opened the door that first night with a soft smile, and eyes that held something he couldn't name. She wasn't like the women he'd dated. No flashy clothes, no forced laughs, no cold ambition. Rachel was graceful, calm. She wore a simple sweater, dark jeans, and no makeup, yet she looked effortlessly beautiful. Her voice was low and warm. "You must be Jason," she said, brushing her auburn hair behind her ear. "I've heard a lot about you." Jason, tired and guarded, just nodded. He didn't know how to react. She was 40. He guessed 17 years older than him, but something about her presence stirred something in him he hadn't felt in a long time. That first dinner was quiet. His father talked about work, the market, old friends. Rachel asked Jason how he'd been. He kept his answers short, still in shock. How had his father married this woman without even telling him? "It all happened fast," David explained casually. "We met at a wine tasting last year, got married in the spring." Jason tried to act like he didn't care, but it hit him hard. His father, who once swore he'd never love again after Jason's mom walked out on them, had married this soft-spoken, elegant stranger in the following weeks. Jason settled into the guest room, the same one he'd slept in as a teenager. Rachel tried to make him feel welcome. She left folded towels outside his door, made fresh coffee in the mornings, and baked pies on weekends, like she actually wanted a relationship with him. It was strange, and yet comforting. She would often read in the living room at night, wearing her reading glasses, one leg tucked beneath her, a glass of wine in hand. Jason found himself drawn to those moments. He'd sit nearby, pretend to scroll through his phone, but secretly he'd watch her, how she'd laugh quietly at a line in her book, how her sweater slipped down her shoulder, exposing pale skin. That made his throat dry. He hated that he noticed. He hated that he cared. They began having small conversations. Nothing deep, just music, weather, books. She recommended a novel once, and he actually read it, just so he could talk to her about it. There was an ease to the way she spoke, like she wasn't trying to impress him, but was genuinely curious about who he was. One night, they sat on the patio while David was out with friends. A storm was rolling in, and thunder echoed faintly in the distance. Rachel sipped her wine, looking up at the sky. "I used to be afraid of storms," she said quietly. "No, I kind of like them. They remind me that the world is alive." Jason turned to her, something heavy in his chest. "You don't seem afraid of much," he said. She looked at him, then not just looked, but saw him. "I used to be," she whispered. "But life has a way of making you numb if you let it." Night, something shifted between them. It wasn't anything said, it was in the silence. In the way their eyes met, just a second too long. In the way Rachel stood when she left and her hand brushed against his arm. The touch was brief, but it stayed with him. The days that followed only deepened the tension. Rachel would laugh at his dry humor in the mornings. Sometimes she'd lean close to pour coffee, and her scent vanilla and something floral would linger on his shirt even after she'd left. Jason told himself it was harmless, just chemistry, just hormones. But it wasn't. He started dreaming about her. Long, strange dreams where she was lying beside him, whispering things he couldn't. Remember when he woke up? He'd jolt out of sleep, sweating, guilty, wanting more. Jason tried to push the feelings away, but they only grew stronger. One afternoon, she walked out of the bathroom in a robe, damp hair clinging to her neck, and smiled when she saw him in the hallway. "Didn't expect you home yet," she said. He stammered something and turned away quickly. But the image of her soft, glowing, half-covered, was burned into his mind for hours. He began to question everything. Was she flirting back? Was this in his head? Or did Rachel feel it too? And if she did, how long before the line between stepmother and son disappeared completely? Jason tried to tell himself that what happened that night on the porch meant nothing, but deep down, he knew better. Ever since that stormy evening when Rachel opened up to him, something had shifted. It wasn't just in the way she looked at him, though that had changed too. It was in the way she moved around him, the way her voice softened when they spoke alone, and how her body leaned just a little closer when they sat on the couch. His father, David, had left again for another business trip to Chicago, this time manned. The house fell into a quiet that felt too heavy. Jason was in the kitchen late one night, shirtless, heating up leftover lasagna. Rachel came downstairs, barefoot in a silk robe that hugged her curves in a way that made his mouth go dry. She looked surprised at first, then smiled. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, her voice low and warm like it always was late at night. Jason shook his head, trying not to stare. "Do you want some?" he asked, motioning to the food. She nodded, sat at the kitchen island, and pulled her robe tighter across her chest, but not enough to hide the way the fabric clung to her. They talked, and for the first time, Jason really noticed the sadness behind her calm. She spoke about how different David had become, how their conversations had turned cold, how she felt more like a housemate than a wife. Jason listened silently, boiling inside. How could his father marry a woman like this and then treat her like she didn't matter? As she spoke, her fingers brushed his on the counter. It was small, maybe accidental, but neither of them moved. Her touch was soft, and her eyes met his with a heat that wasn't innocent anymore. Jason's heart pounded. Everything in him told him to walk away, but he didn't. Rachel let her hand linger a second longer before pulling it back. "I'm sorry," she whispered, suddenly standing. "I shouldn't." Her voice trailed off, but Jason couldn't let her leave. Like that, he stepped forward, gently grabbed her wrist, stopping her. "It's okay," he said, his voice husky and low. "You didn't do anything wrong." Rachel turned toward him slowly, and for a moment, the space between them felt like it was holding its breath. Her eyes were full of fear, longing, and something deeper, something forbidden. Jason didn't plan to kiss her. It just happened. 1 second, they were staring at each other, and the next, his lips were on hers, soft and slow, tasting like wine and heartbreak. She didn't pull away. Her hands found his shoulders, and she leaned into him like she'd been waiting for this longer than she even knew. The kiss deepened, messy and hungry, full of emotion neither of them had words for. His hand slid around her waist, pulling her closer, feeling her warmth through the silk. They broke apart, both breathing hard, eyes wide with shock and desire. "Jason," she whispered, touching his face. "This can't happen." But the way her fingers lingered on his skin said something different. Jason stepped back, guilt already blooming in his chest, but the damage was done. The line had been crossed. That night, they didn't sleep. Not together, not yet. But they both lay awake, staring at the ceiling, reliving that kiss over and over again. Over the next few days, they pretended nothing happened. They made small talk at breakfast, did laundry, watched TV, all with a space between them that burned like fire. But the tension kept growing. Every time they passed in the hallway, every time their hands brushed in the kitchen, it was like an invisible wire between them stretched tighter and tighter. Then came the night it snapped. David was still out of town. Jason had just come in from a late run, sweat glistening on his skin, his shirt clinging to his chest. Rachel was in the living room, barefoot again, legs curled up under her on the couch, wearing nothing but a thin tank top and short cotton sleep shorts. She looked up from her book and froze when she saw him. Their eyes locked. Neither of them said a word. Jason walked over, sat next to her. The air was thick with everything unsaid. Rachel put the book down, her hands trembling slightly. "We can't keep pretending," she said softly. "It's wrong. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "I'm what?" Jason asked, his voice low, steady. "Your stepson." Rachel looked away. "It's not just that, it's everything. The age difference. What people would think. What your father would do." Jason leaned in, gently cupped her cheek, and whispered, "I don't care what anyone thinks." His mouth found hers again, this time slower, deeper, more certain. There was no going back. Their bodies moved on instinct, fingers tangled in hair, lips on skin, breathless moans lost in the silence of the room. That night they crossed every line. It wasn't rushed or careless. It was slow, intense, almost sacred. Like they'd both been starving for something real. When it was over, they lay tangled together on the couch, hearts pounding, skin warm. The weight of what they'd done settling over them like a heavy blanket. Neither of them said a word for a long time. But in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. Not just lust, not just rebellion, was something deeper, more dangerous. It was the beginning of something they couldn't stop. The days after their night together were filled with quiet tension and unspoken desires that simmered beneath every glance, every touch, every word. Jason and Rachel moved through the house like two people balancing on the edge of something dangerous, something that felt too good to stop, but too forbidden to speak aloud. They hadn't talked about what happened that night, not really. What does this mean? Or what do we do now? Only silence, awkward pauses, and moments that left their hearts pounding. But even in that silence, they knew. It wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't just lust or loneliness or boredom. It was something deeper, something more tangled. Every stolen look in the kitchen, every soft touch when passing in the hallway, it all whispered the same truth. They were in this now, and they couldn't go back. When David returned from his business trip, the energy in the house changed instantly. He brought noise, distraction, the usual smell of cigar smoke on his jacket, and loud footsteps in the hallway. But what Jason noticed most was how Rachel changed. Her eyes no longer lingered on Jason's face. She barely spoke at dinner, and when she did, her voice felt forced. She slept in David's bed again, but Jason could hear her footsteps late. At night, pacing the hallway when she thought no one was awake. He saw the sadness in her face, the guilt wearing her down like slow water on stone. Jason felt it too. Guilt that twisted in his gut every time his father laughed with him. Guilt that made his hands shake when Rachel passed him a plate and there, fingers brushed. Still, neither of them stopped. They couldn't. Whenever David left the house, whether for work, errands, or his usual golf weekends, Rachel and Jason found their way back to each other. It wasn't just sex, though the physical part of it was intense and addictive. It was the way they talked afterward, the way she'd lie on his chest and trace circles on his skin with her fingers. They told each other things they hadn't told anyone else. Jason confessed how broken he felt after his last relationship, how he never really felt seen or understood until her. Rachel opened up about her lonely marriage, how David was charming to everyone but cold behind closed doors. How she often cried in the shower just to get it out of her system. Jason hated hearing that. He wanted to protect her, fix everything, give her the love she deserved. But how could he when the love they were living was a secret wrapped in shame? They made rules to survive it. No texts. No calls. Only when David was out. They were careful, at least in the beginning. Secrets like this don't stay small for long. One morning, Jason came down for breakfast, and David was staring at his phone, brow furrowed. "You been seeing someone?" He asked Jason casually. Jason froze. "Why?" David shrugged. "Just wondering. You've been different lately." Jason gave a tight laugh, said no, and walked away. But inside, he was shaken. Had they slipped up? Had Rachel said something without meaning to? Every small movement now felt like it was under a microscope. The worst part? Jason was starting to feel more than just desire. It was falling in love. Really, painfully, deeply in love. The kind that fills your chest and clouds your head. It wasn't just her body, it was her laugh, her strength, the way she made him feel seen. It scared him. Not because he didn't want it, but because he knew what it could cost. One night, while lying in her bed, David was gone on a 2-day fishing trip. Jason looked at Rachel and said, "What if we left? What if we just ran away from all of this?" She looked at him like he'd broken something inside her. "And go where, Jason?" "What do we tell the world? That I left your father for his son?" People don't forgive stories like that. They don't understand love when it doesn't fit the rules. He sat up, angry now, not at her, but at the world. Then, to hell with rules. I don't care what they think. Oh, Rachel did. She had more to lose than he did. Her name, her place in the world. Everything she had rebuilt after years of being pushed around by life and men. And yet, despite all the fear, they kept meeting in the shadows. They couldn't stop. Every goodbye felt harder. Every kiss burned deeper. The longer it went on, the more dangerous it became. And one night, they crossed a line they couldn't undo. David came home early from his trip. No warning, no call. Just the sound of his suitcase rolling into the hallway. Rachel had just kissed Jason goodnight in the kitchen. Nothing more. But the closeness, the look on their faces, it was enough. David stared at them for a second too long. His jaw clenched. "What's going on here?" he asked sharply. Jason swallowed hard. Rachel stepped in quickly, trying to act casual. "Nothing. We were just talking." David looked from her to Jason, his eyes narrowing. "You don't talk to your stepmother like that?" Then he walked away, leaving a tension in the air so thick it was hard to breathe. Jason knew then this wouldn't stay hidden forever. And when the truth came out, it would ruin everything. Asterisk after David's unexpected return that night. Things in the house became tight, tense, like walking on glass barefoot. Jason and Rachel could feel the walls closing in around them, the air thicker, the silence heavier. David didn't say much, but the way he looked at both of them had changed. His usual casualness was gone, replaced with short glances, cold stares, and sudden strange questions that felt more like tests than conversation. Rachel tried to keep her distance, stayed busy, cooked more, spoke less. Jason, on the other hand, felt the pressure boiling inside him. Every time he passed Rachel in the hallway, every time he heard her laughter forced at the dinner table, it tore at him. He didn't want to sneak around anymore. He wanted her, not in secret. Not in shame, but for real. His feelings had grown. Too strong to reel, to keep buried. And he could see it in her eyes too. The way she lingered just a little longer when their hands brushed. The way her breath caught when their eyes locked across a room. Love like that doesn't hide forever. It demands to be seen even when it's wrong. One evening, David left again just for a dinner meeting downtown. Nothing unusual. Rachel was washing dishes in the kitchen, her back turned, wearing a simple tank top and soft jeans. Jason walked in and without saying a word stepped up behind her, placed his hands on her waist. She froze, water dripping from her fingertips. "Jason, we can't," she whispered, not turning around. But her body didn't pull away. He leaned in slowly, his lips brushing against her neck. "We've already crossed every line," he said quietly. "I'm tired of pretending we don't want this." She turned to face him then, her eyes full of longing, pain, and deep aching need. "It's not about want," she whispered. "It's about what we'll lose." He kissed her gently, and this time she kissed him back with everything she'd been holding in. Their kiss was desperate, slow, filled with years of hurt and weeks of secret longing. He lifted her onto the counter and she wrapped her arms around him, melting into him like she belonged there. For a moment, there was no guilt, no fear. Just two people who had been denied love for too long and finally gave in. Afterward, they lay on the living room floor, her head on his chest, wrapped in a blanket. The lights dim and quiet music playing from her phone. Rachel traced his jaw with her fingers. "This can't go on," she whispered. "I can't keep hiding like this." Jason nodded. "Then let's stop hiding. Let's tell him. We'll deal with the consequences together." She stared at the ceiling for a long time. "He'll hate us," she said. "And maybe he should." Jason looked at her, heart pounding. "I don't care. I love you, Rachel. I don't know when it happened, but it's real, and I know you feel it too." She blinked, and tears welled up in her eyes. "I do," she whispered, her voice breaking. "God help me. I love you too." They made a plan. Jason would move out soon, get his own place again, create space. Rachel would talk to David, not about Jason, at least not yet, but about ending the marriage. She said she owed him that much, and Jason respected her for it. But none of that went as planned. Because the next morning, everything shattered. Jason had gone out early to pick up breakfast for everyone. Coffee, bagels, trying to keep things calm until Rachel could talk to David. But when he returned, the front door was wide open. Inside the kitchen was a mess coffee spilled, a mug shattered on the floor, and then he heard it. David's voice, loud and furious, echoing from upstairs. Jason ran up and found the bedroom door wide open. David, standing in the middle of the room holding Rachel's phone in his hand. "You sick bastard," he roared when he saw Jason. "You think I wouldn't find out? You think I'm that blind?" Jason's heart dropped. Rachel stood in the corner, eyes red from crying, her face pale. "David, please let me explain." But David cut her off, throwing the phone at the wall. "Explain what?" "That you've been screwing my son under my roof." "My own son." Jason stepped forward, trying to calm him down. "Dad, listen, it's not like that." But David charged at him, grabbed him by the collar, rage burning in his eyes. "You betrayed me," he growled. "Both of you. Like I'm nothing. Like I didn't give you everything." Rachel screamed for them to stop, trying to pull David back, but he shoved her away, not violently, but enough to make her stumble. Jason snapped. He shoved his father off him hard, and David fell back onto the bed, panting, humiliated, furious. "Get out," David said in a low, broken voice. "Get out of this house, both of you. You're dead to me." Rachel tried to speak, tears pouring down her cheeks. "David, please," but he waved her off. "You made your choice." And just like that, everything was gone. The home, the safety, the small life they had built in secret. Jason and Rachel. Left that day, no bags, no plans. Just silence in the car and hands held tightly between them, clinging to the only thing they had left each other. But even as they drove away, both of them knew. The hardest part was still coming. Asterisk, after they left the house that to David's house. The house that used to feel like home. Jason and Rachel didn't speak for a while. The car ride was silent, the kind of silence where you don't even turn on the radio because the noise feels too heavy. Rachel sat staring out the window, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Jason drove with one hand on the wheel, the other, reaching over now and then just to hold her hand, needing to feel her skin, needing to remind himself that she was still there. That what they had hadn't disappeared along with everything else. They ended up at a cheap roadside motel on the edge of town, the kind with flickering lights and paper-thin walls, but it was all they could afford. Jason had some savings. Rachel had her purse and the clothes she left the house in. That was it. No home, no family, no plan. But somehow, in that tiny room with the old beds and the hum of the broken air conditioner, they found a strange kind of peace. That night, lying in bed, her head on his shoulder, Jason whispered, "Are you scared?" She nodded. terrified. He kissed her forehead. Me too. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. The days that followed were messy and hard. Jason got a job doing landscaping work, long hours, hard labor, but it paid something. Rachel started working at a local diner, waiting tables like she had in her 20s before life got complicated. It was humbling, sometimes embarrassing, but they made it work. They moved into a small one-bedroom apartment above a bookstore, cramped. Drafty, but theirs. They cooked cheap dinners together, shared a single dresser, and slept every night tangled in each other's arms. There were days when Rachel cried in the bathroom so Jason wouldn't see. Days when Jason punched a wall out. Of frustration because he couldn't give her more. Still, they held on. Because what they had wasn't just desire anymore, it was something deeper, something built through pain and sacrifice. It was love, real and raw and terrifying. And even when they argued, even when the world felt like it was against them, they never went to bed angry. They couldn't afford to. Each night, they reminded each other that they were worth fighting for. But even love like that doesn't erase the past. One afternoon, Rachel received an envelope in the mail: divorce. Papers from David. No letter. No explanation. Cold legal terms and the final line that ended her marriage with a single signature. She cried for an hour in Jason's arms. Not because she regretted choosing him, but because no matter how broken the marriage was, it still hurt to be cast aside like nothing. Jason held her tightly, whispered over and over, "You are not nothing." They signed the papers. It was done. Rachel was no longer anyone's wife. But she also wasn't sure who she was now. She was in her 40s, starting over with a man 15 years younger. No savings, no security, no map for this new life they were building. And yet, she loved him in a way she had never loved anyone. She loved the way he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. She loved how gentle he was when she felt broken, how strong he was when she wanted to fall apart. Then came the twist they never saw coming. Rachel missed her period. She thought it was stress, or maybe perimenopause. But something felt different. She took a test, then another. And when she showed Jason the results, those 2 tiny lines, he stared at her in stunned silence. "You're pregnant," he whispered, like the words didn't make sense. She nodded slowly, eyes wide, unsure whether to cry or smile. "I didn't plan this," she said softly. "I didn't even think I could anymore." Hurd took her face in his hands. "Are you scared?" he asked. She nodded again, terrified. He smiled then, a small, nervous smile. "Me too, but I'm also ... happy. I didn't know I could feel this happy and this afraid at the same time." They stood there for a long time, holding each other, letting the truth sink in. They were going to be parents. The world had judged them for their love, had pushed them out, but here they were starting a family. A new life. A second chance. Rachel worried what people would say, what her own mother would think if she found out. What David might do if he ever learned the truth. But Jason kept reminding her, "We don't owe anyone anything. We survived the fire. Now we get to build something beautiful from the ashes." And that's exactly what they did. Rachel kept working through her pregnancy. Jason picked up more shifts, and slowly, piece by piece, their small life started to feel full again. They painted the baby's room pale yellow. They bought a second-hand crib, even laughed more Noreal laughter. It's the kind that comes from surviving something impossible and still holding each other's hand. Their story wasn't perfect. It was messy, flawed, unconventional. But it was real. And for them, real was enough. Asterisk, the day their baby was born was gray and rainy. It's the kind of weather that usually makes people feel small, but for Jason and Rachel, the sky could have been falling and it wouldn't have mattered. She went into labor at 4 a.m., gasping and trembling, and Jason had never moved so fast in his life. He drove through empty streets, running red lights, his hand never leaving hers, whispering, "You're strong. You've got this. I'm right here." Rachel gritted her teeth through every contraction, sweat pouring down her face, her eyes locked on him the entire time like he was the only thing holding her together. And when their daughter finally arrived, tiny pink, screaming her first cry into the world, Jason broke down. He cried openly, holding that little girl in his arms, completely undone. "She's perfect," he whispered, handing her to Rachel, who held her close to her chest like she'd found the missing piece of her heart. In that moment, all the pain, the shame, the fear, they faded. All that mattered was that they had made something beautiful out of something everyone had called wrong, and now here she was, breathing. Living proof that their love had meant something more than just a scandal. They named her Hope, not just because they liked the name, but because that's what she was to them. Hope for a future that didn't follow anyone else's rules. Hope that love didn't have to look like a picture-perfect fairy tale to be real. Hope that even after betrayal, heartbreak, and the judgment of the world, something good could still be born. Jason worked harder than ever, doing side gigs, freelance design work, anything that paid. Rachel stayed home with the baby at first, her body healing, her heart fuller than it had ever been. Their little apartment was still small, still creaked. When you walked, still leaked when it rained, but now it felt like home. The late-night feedings, the baby cries, the diapers and bottles, it was messy and exhausting, but it was real life, and they loved it, of course. The outside world didn't disappear. People talked. Whispers followed them in grocery stores, especially when someone recognized Rachel from her old life. One neighbor even asked Jason, "So that's your wife? Or your mom's friend?" And he just smiled, holding Hope in his arms, and said, "That's the woman I love. That's all you need to know." Rachel struggled sometimes internally. More than anything, there were days she looked in the mirror and wondered if she was holding Jason back. He'd wake up one day and realize he could have had someone younger, someone simpler, someone less complicated. But every time she spiraled, Jason brought her back. "You are the only person who ever saw me. I don't care about what anyone else thinks. I care about you, us, her," he'd say, kissing her forehead, holding their daughter between them. "You saved me, Rachel. You gave me a family." One evening, about a year later, they visited a small park near the river. It had become their favorite spot, a quiet place with a wooden bench under an old oak tree, just far enough from town that no one really noticed them. As the sun set, painting the sky in gold and lavender, Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Rachel blinked, startled. "What are you doing?" she asked, laughing nervously. Jason got down on one knee in the grass, Hope sitting in his lap, babbling, and opened the box. "I know we started in the wrong way," he said softly. "I know it was messy, but I don't care how it started. I care about where it's going. I love you, Rachel. Not just for now, but forever. Will you marry me for real this time?" Rachel covered her mouth, eyes filling with tears. "Jason, are you sure?" she whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he said. She nodded, laughing through her tears, and whispered, "Yes. God, yes." And just like that, they sealed their second chance, not as stepmother and son, not as a secret, but as two people who had survived something most wouldn't understand and had come out the other side stronger. Their wedding was small. Just a courthouse, a couple of friends who didn't judge, and Hope, dressed in a tiny white dress with flowers in her hair. No big celebration, no fancy rings, just truth. Just love, and a promise to never let the past define their future. They didn't need the world's approval. They had each other. And that was enough. As time passed, the judgment faded. People moved on. Or maybe they just got tired of the gossip. Jason and Rachel built a quiet life full of love, patience, and second chances. And every year on the anniversary of the day, they left everything behind. They sat under that old oak tree and reminded themselves, real love isn't always pretty. It's not always clean or accepted or easy. Sometimes it's born from fire. Sometimes it hurts before it heals. But when it's real, it's worth Everything. Even the lies. Even the loss. Even the price of loving the one person you were never supposed to love.